Let us do a quick review of where we are in the goal directed design process, and particularly in the research phase. So we have seen that we have understood following activities: literature review, product prototype and competitive audits, stakeholder interviews, subject matter expert interviews, customer interviews. Now the next topic to consider is user interviews. Users are very important in the goal directed design process because they are the one who finally use the product. So it is very important for the design team to stay focused at the users. Now when it comes to users, there might be two different ways of imagining them. There might be current users or there might be potential users. So current users are basically the users who are currently using the technology or the product that you are set out to redesign. Remember this phrase, redesign, because if there are current users and you are about to design an interactive product, maybe you are redesigning it. So that's a redesign activity where you are more likely to have current users, and potential users may be the one who are not currently using the product, but their needs and their goals are kind of in alignment with the other users of the product. So they are the one who may use the product in the future. So that is why we are calling them potential users. Now current users have experience using the product. So it is important to kind of have a good understanding of the current users, because their experience of using the product may affect their behavior with the redesigned product. Okay, so they might have certain biases or they might have certain presumptions, certain ideas, certain pre-specified idea about the product that you have designed. So it is important to understand them. Now in a typical scenario, if you see on your screen, if you are a member of a design team, you have an intended interactive product in mind. Okay, so that box with the orange dots is the intended interactive product, something that you intend to design. Okay, and while your users, they might themselves be using a few other interactive products, which may or may not be similar to the product that you intend to design. So that is why let us assume that across the user group you have these different boxes, which some of them have properties similar to the intended product. How we are showing that? Some of them have the orange dot on them. So the point is that it is not necessarily a condition that all the products used by your user group may similar to the one that you intend to design, but it is very possible that so here is a typical scenario. Imagine that you are one of the members of the design team who have been given the task of designing a particular interactive product. Now this interactive product, why we are saying that the intended interactive product, because as a member of the design team you intend to design that product. Now if you approach your users, they might themselves be using couple of products, okay, which may or may not be similar to the intended product. So the products which are similar to the intended product have the same orange dot somewhere over them, while those who are different to the intended product are all blues in their appearance. Okay, now designer's imagination of the product and the product that users are actually using, this has to match, this has to correlate in some way, because as far as users are concerned, they have a particular way of using the product which is spread across their entire day. So they might perform a set of activities at the beginning of the day, and then they go out and perform different other activities, and they may end a typical day in a particular manner. Okay, so all these products, they are somewhere embedded in their lifestyles. They somewhere satisfy different goals that these users have, which help these users to sustain their normal life routines. Now as far as designer's intent is concerned, so he is intended to know how would the users adopt the product. Okay, so it is important to know how do they deal with other interactive products similar to the proposed one. Okay, so let's say if you are designing music player application, you may want to know what are all different applications that your users are using. Okay, so how does similar interactive products fit into their life routine? So how do they use these products? Whether they use them, whether they listen to the music on the go, or it is mostly for the recreation purpose with the family, or it is for the entertainment purpose while they are thinking about different things, or it is more reflective in nature. So you have to find under what conditions do they listen to music, and how do they learn functions of different products. So they might be using different applications or products. How do they learn their functions? So that also is important for you to know as a interaction designer. It is also important to know that how do our users orient themselves when it comes to troubleshooting. Okay, so at times you might have seen that people encounter problems with their product, and then some of them sort out. Some of them choose to call the company or the customer care, while others may just go find a local help there. So they might solve a product, they might solve a problem by approaching other people who may help them in solving the problem. So how do they orient themselves when it comes to troubleshooting? Do they do this individually by calling the company, or do they seek help from other users? And what are their goals and motivations? What are their expectations from the product? So this kind of sums up your understanding. You are getting closer to what users are actually using, what users are actually interested in using. That is what you are trying to get closer to, that idea. Okay, so where are the problems in the current product's workflow or information flow? So if you remember, we were saying that there is a domain model. Okay, domain model consists of workflow and information flow. So by probing users, by doing user interviews, you would have an understanding of problems with the current product workflow and information model. So if there are similar products which they are using, maybe there are problems with their workflows and information flow. Through user interviews, it would be an interesting finding to know about it. Do they have adequate domain knowledge to use the product? Okay, that is also one important thing to know. Do they have the sufficient domain knowledge or not? So let's say if they do not have the adequate domain knowledge, now in the redesigned product, you may want to have more help or some instructional design component built in to provide that domain knowledge. So that helps. So this idea that whether they have adequate domain knowledge or not, that knowledge, that understanding helps the design team. Relevance. Okay, so at times user may not be able to articulate their response when asked. Okay, so this is very much a common scene most of the time, that when you go out and you want to ask users about certain responses, they might not be in a position to articulate. Okay, what does that mean? Because there are certain activities which are so deep rooted in their daily routines or in their natural way of performing certain activities that they are not really so consciously thinking about them. So when it comes to articulating those activities, they might fall short. Okay, so at that time what you should be doing, that you should be you should be choosing to do user observation and not interviews. So this is the moment when you have to do observation. Okay, interviews are not the right thing to do at this moment. Okay, because at times, when I am saying that, at times users may not be able to articulate their responses when asked. There are times when users fear of appearing dumb, incompetent or impolite in front of others. So let's say as an interviewer, you approach the users and you imagine the scenario when they are working in a corporation and under office hours and within office hours and during the office hours, you approach them. Okay, so they might fear of being impolite, they might fear of looking incompetent or dumb in front of others, and they might not give you a true sense of reality. Okay, so asking employees about a particular software which their enterprise wants them to use, if you have raised questions like that, maybe the employees may feel that this is not the right time when I should answer this question, because I am in mid of several other employees and it's a time of the office. So how can I criticize something which is, or how can I be critical of something which is provided by my employer? So there are times when you really can't interview people, or even while interview there are aspects which you really can't ask or include in your interview. Okay, so now User observation is also very important, because there are times when you have to ask about the questions when they are deep rooted in their context. Okay. So, let us say you are asking about the activity without considering the context. So, how did you manage to configure the network printer in your office? If you ask that question, how did you manage to configure the network printer in your office, versus if you are asking the question like this, can you teach us how to configure a network printer in this office? Okay. So, what is the difference between these two questions? In the first question, you see that question looks like as if it comes from a formal session, okay, where we are asking them to give us a sense of their way of configuring the network printer in their office. So, they are not in the office, and we are asking them to reflect on their activities that they perform to configure their printer in a location which is different from the location of the interview. So, can you really have a response to this question? Even if they give you a response, it is less likely that the recorded qualitative data will give you a true sense of their behavior, a true understanding of their behavior when it comes to configuring the network printer in office settings. Okay. But if you do the same thing while being in office yourself, okay, if and you ask them, can you show me, can you teach me, how do you usually configure the network printer in this location, and I am also there in this location as an interviewer. If you ask that, they would be giving you responses which are more reflective, which are more indicative of their activities that they perform naturally in the office environment. Okay. So, that is why asking about the actions removed from context, this might not be the right thing to do, or might not be the appropriate thing to do for the design team. If there are times when you need to learn about their actions, you should better consider the context along with the actions. Okay. So, conceptually what exactly are we doing? So you can ask users about their behaviors, what do they behave, why do they behave in a certain way with a particular interactive product. That is one thing that you can do, So you can ask them, or you can observe them as they interact with the product. That is what the conceptual difference between these two conditions. And the later one is what we will prefer in a user observation phase. We will observe them as they interact with the product in their natural environment. Okay. So, also once you have observed them as they behave with their product, any unresolved question about their behavior can then be asked to them. Okay. Let us say you have observed a certain behavior of the user in their natural setting. Now, there are certain questions which you are not able to understand as an observer. Now, you can note down those questions, or you can note down those points, and you can ask users back, can you tell me why did you do this thing at that particular point of time? Can you tell me about it? I would be more than happy to learn. Okay. So, how do you manage to decide so fast your response? So, an example, you can have a look at that. So, there are times when people are so habitual of using a particular software, they respond to dialog boxes as if they are not reading the messages. Okay. So, in that situation, if you are one of the observers, you may say, why they are clicking on dialog boxes and that particular button, okay, continue so fast, they are not really reading those dialog boxes. If you have observed that, if you do not know what is the reason for that, you may want to answer, you may want to ask them later. So, how do you manage to decide so fast your response with dialog boxes? You always tend to click on OK or continue so quickly. It's amazing, but how do you do that? Can you tell me that? So, you have to raise a question after you have observed, if your observation gives you certain unresolved questions. Okay. Now, comes to documenting user observation sessions. How do you really document them? Okay. So, often when you go out observing users in the environment, you keep a notebook, you keep a journal and a pen, that's one of the most handy things to keep, So, you can make fast notes, it can allow you to make, observations, can note down those small phrases, key phrases that appear to your mind that define the entire observation. You can note down those quickly and fast. Okay. Now, there are times when you also carrying audio and video recorders, so Yeah, it's a normal practice nowadays because we all have audio-visual recording facilities in our mobile phones, in our tablets, and so many things that we carry. So, even a user observation team carries them most of the time. So, they may have a very easy access to audio or visual recorders, okay, but be careful not to make them nervous. Be careful that once you set out to recording their behavior, once you set out to recording their behavior, as if you may want to record what they are saying, or you may want to visually capture how they are doing, it might make them nervous, okay. So, you need to be very careful about that, should not obstruct their natural way of responding to different situations. Once they are nervous, they are not really responding in a natural way, and whatever data you are gathering, all the qualitative data that you are gathering is not really the data that you should be looking at, okay. So, you may risk by being not careful, you may risk making your users nervous about being on record. So, your user might be nervous about being on record, and that may obstruct their natural way of responding. Now, an insensible documentation, people who are not sensible to these things, they may collect misleading findings, because users are behaving anyways differently when they are nervous or when they are anxious about a certain set of documentation. And believe me, and always remember that you are the design team member, you are not an audit team member, you are not an auditor, you are a designer who is set out to understand, who is set out to know himself. You are not auditing. So, never convey that feeling to your users while you are doing that observation. Now, documenting user observation sessions, in between these sessions you can also alternate between documentation, okay. So, while you have to be careful about using audio and visual aids, there might be times when you have to use them. So, for example, if you are traveling and if you are observing your users, if you are observing how people interact with their interactive devices while they are in a metro train, or how they interact with the information system in a moving escalator, or how do they interact with the lift. While it is good to be careful about audio and visual recording, there are times when you are required to alternate across these documentation modes, okay. So, let us say if you are on the move, say you are in a car, you may not be able to use your notebook because your car is always on the move and it may be vibrating. So, it's difficult to write while you are moving at such a high speed. You may then choose to use audio or visual recorder. At that time you may tend to use other recording methods, okay. When there are elements in the user's environment which can be best documented using video recorders. So, for example, if you are documenting people, how, let us say you are set out on an industrial control room, okay, you want to document how people manage machineries from a control room in an industry. Now, at that point of time you might want to go and actually keep a record of the control room itself. If the authorities allow, if the user groups allow, you may want to do that. So, when there are elements in the user's environment which can be best documented using video recorders or audio recorders, you may want to use them. Now, underlying all of these methods and ways of documentation, there are fundamental things that as a member of the design team you need to understand. One needs to keep humility, and we need to wait till a sufficient rapport is formed with the user group, and then when that rapport is formed, you can seek further permissions and you can go on document them through audiovisual methods as well. So, keep these things in mind. Now, if you see that user interviews perform one set of activities, they are relevant in one particular way, then user observations are relevant in another particular way. Now, can there be a method which combines both of these? Okay. So, that method is what we call contextual inquiry. Okay. That method is called contextual inquiry. Through the use of contextual inquiry, we can actually combine both one-on-one interviewing and observation. Okay. So, that method employs a model called master apprentice model. Okay. So, what you are seeing on your screen is a master telling an apprentice how to hammer a nail onto a wooden block, Okay, so master is telling apprentice very carefully, do this, do that, you should hold the wooden block like this, you should hold the hammer like this, and there comes the nail, and that's how you strike the nail. Okay, so there is a very careful transfer of knowledge, under the supervision of the master craftsman to the new apprentice is happening. So in the contextual inquiry, we adopt this model. So interviewer observes and asks questions to the user, from the position of a new apprentice, treating user as a master apprentice. So as an interviewer, remember the first thing that we have acknowledged in this session is that as design team member, we are not auditors. Okay, rather what we should be? Apprentice. Okay, we should treat our users as if they are the master craftsmen, and we are the ones who have come to learn a particular craft or skill from them. So we take that position of a new apprentice, treating our users as master apprentice. So combination of observation and interviewing is possible in this model. Now, it is what are the key elements of this model? That it lets you understand user actions situated in their environment. So you are working collaboratively, so you are exploring the activity space along with the user in partnership, that is kind of a partnership that is happening, and you are trying to study their behaviors in their environment of work and in their natural settings. So you are understanding user actions which are situated in the environment. You are trying to study user behavior, maybe towards a product or towards a set of goals in mind, in the environment appropriate to both the user and the product. So you basically set out to an environment where the user is habitual of doing those activities. You basically understand user behavior in an environment where the user perform those activities on a very natural, on a very day-to-day basis. Now, example could be that if you were to set out to design a traffic management system, let's say for a traffic policeman, then it's a good idea to observe and work with traffic policemen in their natural environment, which may be a busy junction in a city, okay, in order to understand their behavior while managing traffic. This is one way of doing that, versus probing him in a laboratory space or in a cabin about his ways of managing the traffic. The first one, where you are working with the traffic policeman, where you are being his apprentice and he is the master craftsman who knows the trait of managing traffic in a busy junction in a city. In that situation, as an interviewer, you would learn much more than when you probe him in a very normal laboratory or office setting and you want him to reflect on his ways of managing the traffic. So in the first is the master apprentice model. It is important to basically understand their behaviors in their natural work environment. The interviewer and the user collaboratively explore the activity space. So, you again refer to that image where the master craftsman is telling the new apprentice, how to do a particular task. So, they both in partnership are exploring that task, are exploring ways of doing that task, accomplishing that task. So, it's a collaboration between, partnership between the user and the interviewer. Okay, so you can alternate between observations and discovery of underlying structure and details of an activity through discussion. So at times, if you are an apprentice, you are required to first observe, then practice, and then maybe if you have further following questions, you may want to probe them. So consider the same example of a traffic policeman. First, you may want to observe how does he do it, and you may tell him, can you show me how do you manage the traffic? And once you have seen how does he manage the traffic, you may want to try it out yourself, although under supervision of the master craftsman, which is our traffic policeman. And if there are times when you have not understood, if you have certain challenges that you have not understood even after the policeman has shown you how to manage the traffic, you may want to ask him further, probe him further. That will let you understand the nitty-gritty of the trade. Now, this understanding, this nuanced understanding of the task or the activity that is relevant for the design of the interactive product is much easier to do, is much easier to gain with contextual inquiry, which employs a master apprentice model. Now, there are things that we should be interested in knowing about contextual inquiry. So, after you have performed this observation and one-on-one interviewing in the form of master apprentice model, you may want to interpret your observations and interpret your findings and interpret your notes. So, it is a post-event analysis, and different teams of designer can do that. So, and what are the objectives of doing this interpretation? Because you want to focus on certain drivers that are responsible for a certain set of things. So, what are these things? So, we need to focus while in interpretation mode, drivers responsible for completing the activity. Now, there might be formal and informal groups, their roles and responsibility. So, we understand that there might be some formal elements or informal groups, user groups, which also come in and play their roles. So, for example, managing a traffic, maybe it's not just the traffic policeman, maybe there are some other informal user groups as well. So, for example, like a home guard, so responsible for completing the activity. So, this may be about formal and informal groups, their roles and responsibilities, and how these formal and informal groups communicate with each other, what are their communication patterns. So, and then you are also interested in knowing drivers responsible for constraining the activity. So, maybe there are policies and regulations, maybe there are cultural nuances which constrain users to perform those activities in a certain way. Okay. And there are drivers which are responsible for accomplishing those activities. So, there are like strategies that users follow. What are the strategies that users follow? Do they improvise on their strategies? Do they adopt to different strategies when the challenges, when new challenges arrive, and they discover new solutions? So, how do they basically accomplish their task? So, what are the drivers responsible for that? And then there might be also be drivers responsible for creating their environment. So, for example, how do they organize the environment to make their work easier? So, you might have seen a lot of people like in India, they would open up their shop. The first thing that they would do is not really the business that they have arrived for. That shop is meant for doing a business, but the first thing that they do is they open up the shutter, they wipe out the floor, and then they worship the shrine. There might be a small shrine in most of the shops. So, these are the activities which precede the activity of business when it comes to the example of small business owners in India. There might be things that they are doing to the environment which make their work easier. So, all the shopkeepers, they might be believing that doing those things earlier in the day help them do a better business, and that is their ultimate goal. Now, creating intermediate artifacts. Now, artifacts users create while performing the activity. So, you might have seen that a lot of us keep small notebooks, small pocket books where we write down different things which are not really the ultimate, which are not really the end means, which are not really the end goals, but they are different intermediate goals. They are different intermediate objects and things that we write to accomplish a larger goal. So, we also create artifacts while performing activities. So, contextual inquiry has that potential to deliver designers that kind of understanding. Now, there are specific recommendations when it comes to contextual inquiry. Since this is a very immersive inquiry, like you go out and you observe users in their field, in their natural environment, you become the apprentice, treat them as master craftsmen. It is a very immersive experience, but you must know how to shorten the interview session. In general, an interview which may last up to an hour gives you a good enough set of insights to go further with the design process. And maintain a small interviewing team. Maybe if you are in a team of, let's say, 8 designers, you may want to create further teams of 4, where you may want to create further 4 teams with 2 designers in each team, so that you can alternate between note taking and probing, and alternate their roles. As a member of the design team, you can alternate your roles while you are on to contextual inquiry. So, a team of 2 designers is often followed. Now, identify goals first. You might have seen that contextual inquiry as an activity, as a method, focuses essentially on task. How would you do a particular task? So, you might ask in the example as we have seen, we might be in a position to ask our master craftsman, the traffic policeman, how does he manage the traffic. So, managing the traffic is the task. So, contextual inquiry essentially considers the task. So, it is a task focused methods, but before we understand the task, we need to determine goals, because there might be certain tasks which are linked with a particular goal. Okay. So, it is good to determine goals which may lead to relevant tasks before you set out for contextual inquiry.